are involved, it may make it, less likely. If an economic downturn means a collapse in the price of oil, kind of hard to imagine at the moment. This clearly has impact for existing governments and may well, in fact, help recruitment. On the other hand, right now it seems that we're getting over the economic crisis. The stock market hasn't done so badly. I've started now to actually open those envelopes from the mutual fund companies as opposed to just putting them aside and just not daring to open them. And so, I'm not quite sure just how much of a factor this is going to be. But obviously, it's an important element, and if things go badly again, then obviously problems cascade, don't they?
Questions?
Everett Lilia, U.S. European Command. My question goes back to the parallels between the Marxist revolutionaries and what you see with the radical Islam. If you hold to the view that it was the contradictions within the system of Marxism that was ultimately its downfall, that as it kind of ran its course, it wasn't able to sustain itself and collapsed. Do you see parallels with the reemergence of revolutionaries in the Middle East, albeit branded under a different name if you in reading your work, or Gile Capel, and do you see is there a way that you would see the movement burning itself out with contradictions within in the same way? And added into that the specter of globalization, and how does that either give it new legs for sustaining itself or accelerating what could be its eventual demise?
I think there's sort of good news and bad news with regard to your question, is that I think that, yes, it's very likely that this process could happen, but it's not likely to really become operable unless more such regimes come to power, which is something that we don't want to see. But it's when these people seize power, any group of revolutionaries, that the trouble begins. In other words, revolution is not an easy thing to accomplish. You have to be pretty single-mindedly focused on it. If you fail, there are some pretty negative consequences. The kinds of people who succeed at this are pretty ruthless. But once they come to power, the problem is what now? In other words, that instead of just one goal, overthrowing the people whom were there before, they now have lots of goals. In other words, that they're responsible for jobs, for education, for all these things. It requires resources. It requires a certain amount of cooperation, and they're often not used to cooperating, not at all. And what happens is that if things don't go well, and they usually don't, in other words, authoritarian revolutionaries are not good at improving economies, at least in a satisfactory manner, then disillusionment begins. That's when it really starts to grow. My sort of evidence for this was 2 visits I made to Iran, one in 1992 and one in 2005, and it reminded me so much of visiting the Soviet Union back in the early 1980s, except that it was even worse. In the old days, you go to Moscow, it was never hard to find a Russian who would complain to you, a visiting Westerner, about the Soviet Union, about communism, but not in front of another Russian they didn't know. Then the conversation stopped. In Iran, they didn't care who heard them complain. I had this incredible experience where I'd been at a dinner party the previous night, and everyone was complaining about the regime, and I just said, well, you're part of the old elite, this is not a representative sample. And one man said, I'm going to prove this to you. Tomorrow we're going to go on a cab ride. The buses were on strike. We got on a cab ride, rode around for 2 hours, and the cabs were acting like buses, just, people coming in and out all the time. And there were like up to 8 of us in this little cab. As soon as people were introduced that, hey, this is a visiting American, they just started complaining right off the bat. They didn't care who else was in the cab and who heard, telling just amazingly scandalous jokes about the Ayatollahs and their various proclivities. And it was a universally held view. And I think that we saw with the Green Revolutionary Movement, although it didn't succeed, at one point we had up to 2 million people out on the street. This is pretty significant, it seems to me. What it showed to me was that, this regime does not have popular support. Maybe the public can't get rid of the regime, but can it withstand much of a shock? And I think that this is the difficulty that the Iranians in. And this is sort of the oldest existing Islamic revolutionary regime. In other words, that over time it hasn't gotten more popular, it's gotten less popular. And of course you're seeing elite disagreements as well. And I think that this is in many respects what we can expect elsewhere. In other words, that they don't seem to have a magic formula for making things work better than, say, the Soviets did. And so I think that what you point to is something that is real, in that we are witnessing it, and we should see we should expect it.
Zina Kalash from Atlantic Television News. Regards to the withdrawal of getting the troops to get the troops out of Afghanistan, some Republicans just came back from Afghanistan, and they're saying that the withdrawal is indefinitely. What is your reaction on it?
Is definitely what they're saying?
That they want to extend the...
They want to extend it. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that that's what they're doing now. If I were a Republican politician, and I'm not, that's what I'd be doing. In other words, that you want to discredit whatever the Obama administration is doing. But I think it's very different if they suddenly get back. In other words, they know what cost them the elections in 2006 and 2008. That unpopular interventions, long-lasting interventions, didn't help them. And so I think that, it doesn't surprise me that they say this now, and I don't think that we should regard this as a predictor of their behavior once in office. And it would have to be in the presidency, not simply in control of one house or even both of Congress.
I have a question from Khalil Jahshan of Pepperdine. A couple of questions. How do you fit the recent developments in Tunisia into your analysis? Do they signal a weakening in radical Islam, or do they signal a strengthening in nationalist elements? Mm-hmm. And when do you expect radical Islamists, or what do you expect radical Islamists to do now to regain momentum?
Mm-hmm. These are very interesting questions, and I think that we have to now talk about Tunisia. That this has changed an awful lot. I don't know what the outcome is going to be in Tunisia. It appears that we have witnessed something akin to one of the color revolutions, that we saw in, Serbia in 2000 or Georgia 2003, Ukraine 2004. And these also occurred very quickly, very rapidly. These peaceful democratic revolutions. This is a subject that deserves a tremendous study because they can occur far more rapidly than violent revolutions in terms of actually toppling a government. There's lots of reasons for that, which I don't want to get into here. You're welcome to sign up for my revolution seminar at George Mason this coming spring, if you like. We'll talk about that in depth. But I think that the real issue is it going to succeed? In other words, that